happy Monday. Thank you for joining me for this week's Unlocking the Magic of Leadership. Now, this week we're going to be diving into the third key, which is all about galvanize your employees. Now, when we think about how to galvanize your employees, it's how do we shock or excite them into taking action while also providing a safe space for them to try things. And a big piece of this is directly tied to accountability. As humans, we feel safest when we know what the expectations are. And so as leaders, the way that we can do that is by effectively and professionally holding people accountable. Now, the tool that I'm going to be sharing with you today is not my tool. It was developed by the Center for Creative Leadership long before I was born. But it is a phenomenal tool. It is an oldie but a goodie, has been around forever. And the reason why it continues surviving through all of the flavors of the day when it comes to delivering feedback is because it is super effective. So what does SBII stand for? It stands for situation, behavior, impact, and intent. So the situation is just that. What was the situation? If we think about our brains and the way that they work, our brains are a lot like a video camera, not an accurate video camera. That is an Unlocking the Magic of Leadership episode for another day, but it is like a video camera. So what we're wanting is to help the person dig through their mental files to find out what are we talking about so they can pull that memory up. So let's say I'm going to give feedback to Courtney and I tell Courtney on Monday during the manager's meeting. That's the situation. It lets her know, okay, we're talking about Monday during the manager's meeting. Now, the next piece is probably the most critical, and the next piece is behavior. Now, when we think about the behavior, a lot of times when we give feedback, we give the interpretation of a behavior or the judgment of a behavior. For example, we might say that somebody's really friendly, or somebody was really rude, or that person is a leader, all of these things. But when we say friendly, rude, or leader, all of those are judgments or interpretations of behaviors. So thinking about friendly, what are behaviors that somebody would do that would lead us to believe that they were friendly? They might smile, make eye contact, shake our hand, ask about our day. Those are all very specific behaviors. Now, the reason why this is important is because when we give judgment, people don't know what to do with those and they get defensive, especially for constructive feedback. Whereas if you give behaviors, people know what to do with that. So, for example, let's continue with the example of Courtney. So let's say that I observed Courtney being kind of rude to one of her colleagues. So my feedback could be,
hey, Courtney, Monday during the manager's meeting, you were really rude.
If I'm lucky, Courtney's going to say,
oh no, how was I rude?
If I'm not lucky, and this is a very real experience, the response is going to be, I'm not rude. You're rude. Why are you talking to me like that? That's rude. And you know what? They're not wrong. Because if I tell somebody that they were rude, they can't do anything with that. There's nothing to fix. Whereas if I tell Courtney,
hey, so on Monday, during the manager's meeting, I saw that Susan asked you a question.
And before she could finish asking you the question, you cut her off and immediately gave a very shortened response. Okay, cutting somebody off, giving a very shortened response, that is a behavior. Courtney can see that behavior and say, oh, okay, yes. Now, we have the situation, Monday during the manager's meeting. The behavior, somebody asked a question, you cut them off and gave a very abrupt answer. Now, the next piece is the impact. This is where after we share the behavior, then we come into the impact. With the impact, with the Courtney example, is the impact of this was I noticed that Susan sat back and didn't ask any other questions, and neither did anybody else in the meeting. My fear is that it came across as rude. Okay, so the impact is what happened, what I saw happen amongst Courtney's teammates, and my fear was that it came across as rude. So we're still tying in how it could come across without starting with that point, giving very specific behaviors that Courtney can do something about. Now, the next piece after we get to impact is intent. And I would say second to behavior, this one is the most important part. And the intent is asking a question to open up the conversation. You see, when we give the feedback, the SBII feedback, that's not the end of the conversation. That's the beginning. So the full response for Courtney for this feedback might look something like, Courtney, on Monday during the managers meeting, I saw that Susan asked you a question, and before she could finish asking the question, you cut her off and gave a very abrupt answer. I saw her physically pull back. She didn't ask any questions, and none of your other teammates asked any questions. My concern is that this came across as rude. Intense statement. I realize this is only my perspective. I would love to hear what was going on with you. What was going on? Now, that was short and sweet, maybe a minute as we went through that, but it gives a full example. And then the final piece is asking the question. So tell me, what was going on? And that's where the conversation happens. Now, because there are those times where somebody's going to cry or they're going to get angry or they're going to shut down, all of those pieces. So work through SBII. And if you're interested, we'll put some links down from the Center for Creative Leadership that can help you dive into it. And then we'll follow up with what happens when it goes south. All right. Thank you for joining me for this week's Unlocking the Magic of Leadership, all about galvanizing your employees. Have an absolutely amazing week. And don't forget, as always, you got this. I'll see you next week.